All right, seniors, I am going to start covering, some of the little history parts from your textbook. It's stuff we covered in class, but for those of you who are out, I'd like to kind of give you a real quick, heavy, run through it. It shouldn't take too long. I'm hoping to keep these small. I feel like I'm wasting my time. The last couple of times I put a video up, I think my kids that are at home doing online learning are watching them, but for the most part, I'm getting like 3 to 7 of you looking at these, which that's a lot of time for no one to pay attention. We got tests in today, so we'll see how you guys did without the additional help. Maybe you don't need this. I don't know, but I'm going to keep doing it for the kids who are at home and who might need some extra help since you're not here for lecture. So, yeah, I'm griping a little. I apologize. All right, here we go. So if you look on your weekly agenda for week 4 and you go to Tuesday, 9/1, so September 1st, I've got 5 big discussion points we covered on that Tuesday. Those of you who are here saw we took most of the class to get through these. We kind of veered off track a couple times, but let's look at these real quick. And again, we're going to keep it short and simple. The first note is about 5 major invasions that occurred in ancient times and how they impacted England. If you will look on page 3 of your text, you will have a page that has all 5 of these listed. They're in this order. The Celts originally, then you had the Romans, the Anglo-Saxons, the Scandinavians, and finally the Normans. These 5 groups are all going to contribute greatly to the stuff we're going to look at over the next couple of units, actually. We're kind of, the last 3. The first 2 don't really contribute literarily to it. Some of their stories, some of that type of stuff is left in the area and kind of works its way in. But for the most part, the Celts and Romans didn't leave us much in the way of literature to discuss. The Anglo-Saxons did, though, and that's what we're going to pick up. Now, not a lot, but they left us some. So, and then the Scandinavians are going to contribute a little bit, and then, of course, the Normans are going to come, and then, England begins to get more, I don't want to say civilized because that's a loaded word, but civilized, I suppose. All right, so if you look in your book, we got date ranges for these people, and again, I want you to do some of this work on your own. Okay, if you do not have a book, you need to send me a message so we can get you some notes on this. But hopefully those of you, especially those of you at home, are doing that. Those of you who are at school, you have access to books. You are more than welcome to take notes or write stuff down. Okay, I'm sorry, take notes or take pictures. There we go. So we got different things. The Celts were more of a warrior-like barbarian type society who, contributed some language, some names of different rivers and stuff, but for the most part, for literature, not big help. Now, the Romans are going to contribute things like roads and a little bit more structure, which, allows the beginnings of civilization. Most cultures, yes, there is writing in cultures that are not big cultures, okay? You've got cave paintings and things like that, which qualify as writing, okay? And those would be in more nomadic or, more, I hate using the word barbarian, but barbaric type tribes, all right? But the Romans coming here and laying that groundwork gives you the start of having, more trade, which allows people to change up the way they, deal with agriculture and things like that, which allows you to maybe have some sedentary societies, which allows you to develop maybe a literary society. So we're getting the beginnings here. They're taming the wild in some way. But then the Anglo-Saxons come in, and man, the Anglo-Saxons, there's a third group that continuously gets left out. I guess it's too many words. But the Jutes also are part of this. There's 3 groups: the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes. Jutes, Jutes. I know that sometimes my southern accent makes things sound different. But these 3 groups come and they do a lot. They're a lot more about settling this land. The Romans were here as really raiders, there to plunder things and just for their own pride. They weren't there to make a home. But the Anglo-Saxons do. In fact, the big contribution, in my opinion, that they add is the name of the country, the Angles, the England. It was usually Anglo-land, and so you can see where that kind of evolved. And of course, the Saxons, a lot of words from their language have been kind of co-opted into what we speak today. Scandinavians come, and this is where we're really going to pick up the stories we get. I mean, the first 3, the poems we read, which are some of the only full things that we have from the Anglo-Saxon period, are all obviously of Scandinavian origin. It's the Anglo-Saxon period, but I think we're going to deal with Scandinavian people who brought it over. It's obvious these stories are not just England. Some of them could be, I guess. Beowulf definitely is not. Beowulf, which is the big piece we cover in here, is obviously from the Scandinavian area. And these people also would have been considered more raiders initially, who came to, plunder, but eventually some of them stayed too. And again, once that happens, their culture and their language are kind of assimilated, and we have this big melting pot of all of these different groups. Finally, the big one is in the year 1066, the Normans come, and that's going to change everything. And they bring something that's going to be one of our other big points, and that's feudalism, which I explained in my class, and I'm going to keep it very basic here. Feudalism is basically a government system that runs like a pyramid scheme. The king owns everything. He divides up the land between people. There'd be his vassals, and they'll in turn divide it up, and everyone keeps dividing it until it gets down to the bottom, where you've got the people who are actually working the land, who are then taxed, and they have to pay the guy ahead of them, who in turn pays the guy ahead of him, and so on, up, kicking it up the ladder to the king. So you have a lot of people working the land and doing all of the work, getting very little, while a bunch of other people are profiting off of nothing. So, if you can't tell by my tone here, a terrible system. Okay. Any other big things that I want to cover in here? Let me see. On pages 4 and 5, my advice to you is to look through those and highlight things. You need to know what's on that. It's not just what we talk about here. All right. What I've talked about here is really not stuff in the book. Everyone's responsible for the book reading as well as for whatever's covered in lecture or whatever's covered in these videos. And I try to make sure the big things I'm going to cover are done in both of them. All right. So what we get next is the third thing on here. This is the impact of nature and environment. And that's going to be the way this textbook is set up is it has essential questions across time. And I think there's 3 of them mainly. And what these are these questions that you can ask of every era, and you can look at, they're kind of open-ended questions. There's not a specific. There's a lot to do with it. Like for the one we're going to look at today, and then I'm going to go ahead and look at the other ones too. But the one today was for Tuesday was what is the relationship between literature and place? And by place there, they mean like the nature, the location around you, especially this time period where nature had such a big impact on the lives of the people there. England is very far north. It's very cold. It's very gloomy. It's very rainy. It's an island. It's isolated. The people there felt exile. Not today. Today we have so many things to help you feel connected. We have heating. We have all sorts of things that allow a lot of the more oppressive elements of British nature and climate to be kind of mitigated. But in that time period, when we're looking at, which is a huge time period, by the way, this goes from, we're starting with 449, which is, early, and we're going to go to 1066. And so we're looking at, centuries of work here. So initially, that really colors their writing. The 3 poems we're going to read are all very gloomy. They're very depressing. A Christian monk got a hold of them and wrote them down because originally all of this would have been oral. There was no writing in some of these early cultures. So when he got a hold of it, he threw little bits of light in it by putting Christianity in there. He's not a good writer, though. I just got to be honest with you. He definitely in the poetry, and I'm not saying it's the same guy, but the poems, they feel forced. It feels like the guy just, you've got this guy on a boat talking about how awful life is and how he sees no point and the world's falling apart. And then all of a sudden there's something about hope with Christianity kind of tacked on the end. And it definitely feels out of place. The guy that did Beowulf does a better job of sticking it in there. Now there's a couple of awkward passages, but for the most part, he does a decent job. But that's a big deal. The nature, the way it was. Today, you still see this in a lot of countries. Music that comes out of some of these countries is much more depressing and gloomy, just not only in the lyrics, the way it sounds. It's just got a cold feel. If you're a big music person and you listen to any kind of like rock music out of Scandinavia, it's very cold. And that's because we're a product of our environment, not just the people around us, but the stuff around us, the place around us, the nature around us. You think about here in the South, how much that impacts us, people down here are generally more friendly. I'd say, I don't want to say happier, but let's just throw that out there to fit my description here. And a lot of it's because we have a lot of sun. Yes, it rains here a lot, but it's intermingled with sun. There's beaches. People are outside a lot. So there's a lot that makes this more pleasant, although I definitely would prefer living in gloomy old England than in hot, stinky South Alabama. But those of you who love it here, apologies. So the other thing that we have that we want to look at really quick before I go into the Thursday work, which I'm going to put in here too, so if you can watch both of them. But the other thing is that literature allows us to form a national identity. Now, the U.S. is struggling with that. But the U.S. is still a relatively young country. I want you to understand that. Yes, we've been around as a nation for over 2 centuries. But you look at countries like England. England's been around for much longer than that. So some of this early writing has formed their national identity. So Beowulf is one of the things that does that for the British country or the British area. That's not a country; it's a mixture of several countries. We also see things like this with Germany. Germany's got their own, the Nibelungenlied. I'm sure I mispronounced it, but they've got that. Various cultures who've been around for a long time have this like central literary work or a few works put together that kind of help mark them. We have that, I think. I think we do see that. I just don't think it's really, a literate, like a narrative or a fictional thing. I think some of our early political writings really have marked us as a country. We came in where we didn't need myth and all these other things to kind of generate a national identity. So, we have it, in my opinion. But literature definitely is a way to establish that because, it helps. Because what it does, and we're going to talk about this more with the next couple of questions, but what it does is it establishes these are the traits or these are the morals that we want our people to have. Your heroes are what embodies your country, especially in this time period when there weren't as many stories to be told as there are today. These people would have known Beowulf backwards and forwards, and the Beowulf would be the guy that kids would look up to, and they'd try to strive to be like him, and that helps build a national identity as opposed to a bunch of random garbage on Netflix that teaches you anything but morals, and that's what we found our stuff on. Sadly. Okay. Hey, let's skip ahead to Thursday. Those of you who've already sat through my Tuesday lecture and stayed awake and were able to follow it, you would pick up here, which is right at 11 minutes and change. So right before 12 minutes. So now we pick up on page 9 of your textbook. Okay. And again, I'm just kind of loosely looking at the pages. You're responsible for that, but you're responsible for that stuff. But you'll be able to read it and look at this and maybe get some help out of it, okay? So the next thing you have is about literature as a way to record history, all right? So, and this is found in the section, this is our second essential question, which was how does literature shape or reflect society? And in that case, like I said, we're talking about it helps shape our morals, what we just talked about. But it also helps us to record our history. What we know about the Anglo-Saxon people comes from a few artifacts for sure, but I mean, those without context, who knows what they are? Literature like Beowulf has helped us kind of construct a narrative of these people. What we know about the ancient Israelites comes from, a few, marketplace records and stuff, I guess you wouldn't need, but a lot of it's from the Bible. And whether you want to treat that, whether you're a believer and you treat that as a holy book that's inerrant, or you're a person who just treats it as another piece of literature, it still gives you this kind of history of these people. So really, guys, this is why we study this. History and literature are intertwined. Okay. Literature is a way to record history, and it's a way that's much more interesting than a book of facts, to be honest with you. It's a way to transfer values from generation to generation. You write fables and kids read them, and then they learn about the tortoise and the hare. And I'm not trying to say this is a myth. Please understand me, but that what I just mentioned was a myth. But you also, if you were in Sunday school, you ever had stories about Noah's Ark or Daniel and the lion's den, and those are also ways we transmit values of what we believe. And no, I'm not calling it a myth. So no, please don't give me any angry hate mail. Somebody would have to watch it for that, right? So anyway. All of these are ways we transfer our values, okay? Literature is also a means of social commentary. It's a vehicle for social change. Writers forever have been the progressives in a society. They're constantly on the edge of things, pushing things, saying this is a problem. We need to fix this. They're the ones who get your attention because, some politician standing on stage hollering a bunch of stuff, most of us have learned to kind of tune that out, because most of it's nonsense. But what we still have are stories. You can listen to a narrative about something and it really grab your attention and not even realize you're getting a moral lesson until later on, and then you're kind of forced to think about it. So there's a lot of ways of transferring our values. There's ways of commenting on the social ills and things that you want to see changed. Literature has so much more power than it's just something to read. Okay, it's not just entertainment. You can enjoy literature, but literature has more to do than Harry Potter. Okay, that is not literature. And you may love that book, and good for you if you do. But I'm glad you read, but the fact is that that book has no value outside of entertainment. All right. So you need stuff like Beowulf, which so many people hate because they find it to be boring and stodgy. But the fact is that book has influenced millions and millions of people, or that poem has influenced millions and millions of people. All right. Our third our third big question, or essential question, as your book calls it, is what is the relationship of the writer to tradition? And again, this is going to be about how writing helps not only retell traditions so that they don't die.
Rich, please come to the front. Your mom is here. Please come to the front.
All right. Well, there you go. There's a little bit of bonus for you. Students being called to the office. All right. So anyway, back to what we were doing. Literary traditions, things that ways of writing, sonnets, haiku, things that have been around for centuries. This is a way of transitioning and not transitioning, transferring them to future generations. But it also transfers other elements of tradition, not just literary things, traditions that we have as families, traditions we have as far as like holidays we have and stuff. Literature is very good at transferring that down. And it's really necessary in today's world because today we just don't spend a lot of time sitting down with our parents and learning about their traditions. So, I mean, most of us are in such a hurry to get away from, hang out with our friends that we don't spend the time we should learning about tradition. And a lot of it dies. But thank God for literature, which keeps it alive. It may die in your particular household, but there's other people reading it and are picking it up. And even if they don't realize it, it's becoming a part of their lives. All right. It's amazing what literature truly can do. And we're going to see the starts of it in the it's not the Western tradition, in the British tradition. Now, we got to realize that Western literature travels back even farther. You got the Greeks and the Romans that were into literature way before this. And really, if you want to move to, we're talking about the Western tradition there. If you want to go even farther east to places like China, they've been at it for even longer. So we're just getting the British version of it right now, guys, because this year is about British literature, and we're gonna get into some European stuff, not just British. I know Britain's a part of Europe, by the way. I'm just saying beyond the shores of England, we're gonna see some other stuff too. So really, what do you need to know from all this stuff? Well, you need to know what's in the book. Okay, you need to read over that. That is a very, very, very surface view of the important details going on in the country at that time. But you also need to remember a few things. One, you need to remember our three essential questions because we're going to talk about them constantly. Now, these essential questions are for your book. They're not the 5 new ones that I post for you every week. Those are very specific to what we're talking about. These are overarching for all of literature. Okay, so when we talk about our first one was about location. What was it again? What is the relationship between literature and place? You need to be able to talk about that. You need to be able to talk about how the isolation of living on an island and away from people, and the only people you usually saw were coming to raid you at this time. How that impacted writers. We're going to talk about how the weather changed the mood of the writing. Then we're going to talk about how literature shapes or reflects society, how it transfers values from generation to generation, how it tells us what a hero is and tells us what a villain is, and how it tells us who we want to look up to and who we want to avoid becoming. And then also the third one was what is the relationship of the writer to tradition? And by that we mean, how has writing helped shape your national identity? How has it shaped your personal identity, your family identity? Has our identity impacted writing? How have various things that we've seen in writing, again, I mentioned sonnets, probably the easiest one to talk about. How have those been carried through literature? And, in other words, just how does literature impact what's happened in the past? How does it take it from the past where so many things die and bring it to the future where it can become a part of, our identity now? Okay. So I know we're kind of rambling. We're all over the board here. I'm operating just from the notes I gave you guys. And really, to be honest with you, this is a small part of the test. The next video that I'm going to shoot, I'm going to go help Mr. Jones, who was at my door just a minute ago. I'm going to go see him, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to record a video about the Seafarer. And this is where we start getting into very specifics, and you'll see me get out of my stumbling and mumbling and bumbling because now we're in my world. We really are at that point. So I hope that the couple of you that watch this, and yes, I'm still complaining about that. I hope a couple of you that watch this are getting something out of it, if nothing else, a little bit of entertainment. And hopefully this will help you just a little bit on as to why you're having to take this class or this course, which, you may think, why do I need to read Beowulf? Why do I need to read poems from thousands of years ago? Well, because those poems help set the stage for things you do like today. some of the stuff you watch on Netflix, and some of the stuff you watch, or some of the books that you read, because I know some of you do read, are based on this. Any of you that read stuff like, when you were a kid, you read Percy Jackson, things like that. Those are based on actual ancient myths. Now, not from Beowulf, but ancient Greek and Roman myths. So this stuff still impacts writing today because writers read and we know about this stuff. And the things you love that people write, a lot of it is based on things they read. And this is how that happens. So, anyway, enough of my rambling. I will see you guys back for the Seafarer here in just a few minutes. I hope that this was helpful. And if it wasn't, thanks for listening anyway.